This is a great clip of Ben Shapiro chatting to Douglas Murray about the absurd double, even triple standards applied to Israel in the way she conducts her war against the modern-day Nazis of Hamas. They're so absurd, the standards the world hold Israel to, that they're not even possible to be achieved. And when Israel does try and abide by those standards, they dismiss it anyway as genocide. So I want you to see them talking about this, because it is so important that we get clarity and understand that the attacks on Israel are disingenuous.
The sort of expectations that the world has placed on Israel in the middle of this conflict are unprecedented in any conflict I've ever seen in my lifetime, or anyone that I can even think of. The idea that in the middle of a war, it is your job to resupply the civilian population of the enemy that sympathizes with and provides cover for the army that you are fighting, that it's not only your job to go house to house, it is your job to sacrifice your own soldiers in order to protect civilians who are being used as human shields by the opposition. And then, if a mistake is made in an urban combat environment with, by the way, the single best terrorist to civilian kill ratio in the history of urban warfare, that somehow it's Israel's fault, it's Israel's problem. Where do you think that sort of double standard is coming from?
Well, I think it's one of the things that absolutely screams out at me is the astounding lack of empathy for the general population in Israel. I mean, let me start with this. Can you imagine anywhere else in the world where hundreds and hundreds of young people are at a rave, a peace rave, a music rave, some of them taking psychedelics, some of them not, but just having a great time, and are suddenly and things I can't describe on air, and the world doesn't have sympathy with them? Like, where else would that happen? If there was a rave in Florida tomorrow, and that happened, and it could, I would expect the victims, the American victims, to be the focus of enormous attention and sympathy. Didn't happen. Not only has it not happened, in New York the other week, when an exhibition memorializing the Nova Party and the atrocities that went on there and the victims, when this exhibition is in Lower Manhattan, there are crowds outside calling for intifada. I mean, can anyone imagine that this is, if you were a survivor of the Manchester Arena bombing in 2017 or the Bataclan massacre in 2015, you would expect the world would not be against you for being blown up. But in Israel, it's different. And it's the same with the media. And it's the same with the war in Gaza. Some months ago, a terrible, terrible thing happened with 3 Israeli hostages by members of the IDF coming out of a building. They didn't realize that they were hostages, obviously. Now, you would have thought, again, first of all, just beyond appalling for the victims who'd already been kidnapped for months by Hamas. But then think of the soldiers who shot them. And this fraction of a second mistake that they'll never be able to forgive themselves for. Never forget. And the world reports it as the idea 3 Israeli hostages, and the world says things like, is there nothing these Israelis won't do? They even do their own. And the world doesn't know that every single soldier who's been fighting in Gaza can tell you that every day civilians will come out of a building or something waving white flags, and from the center of them will come people dressed exactly like them, because amazingly enough, Hamas doesn't obey the rules of war, and that's just all the time. So when I hear people say who have no experience of war or urban combat say things like, I can't understand why that happened. You haven't even begun to try to understand. But if there's an underlying reason, I think that it's that a significant amount of people in the West have been educated, miseducated, into the idea that in some way Israel is and always is the aggressor. Israel has done something wrong, and anything that is done in response to the something wrong can kind of be excused. And I hate that, not only because it is wildly untrue, but if you remember the last time that anything remotely similar happened in America, 9/11, there were some people like the historian of ancient Rome, Mary Beard, who wrote in the London Review of Books that it was impossible to get out of your head after 9/11 the thought that to some extent the Americans had it coming to them. By the way, she's still all over the media, of course, and has always been commissioned by the BBC and many others. But most Americans didn't much care for that tone of voice. Most of us in Britain didn't much care for that tone of voice. But Israel is the one country which, when it's blown up or attacked, its women are, its children are, there's a kind of yes, but. And if you go back to the yes, but, what do you actually mean? What is the clause that you want to go back to? It's the foundation of the state. And, as my debating partner in Toronto the other week, Natasha Hausdorff, said, it's a very interesting one, that, because a mother and father, when they're having a child, may debate whether they want to have a child. They may debate, if the wife is pregnant, whether or not they should abort the child. These are all very, very difficult questions and unpleasant questions that people think about. Once a child is 70 years old, you're talking about whether or not the child should be. That's not anything but murder. Well, the state of Israel is many decades old now. And if you believe it shouldn't have been created, you believe in murder. The state of Pakistan, which is a pretty catastrophic state, was created around the same time that Israel was created. And I know of nobody outside of perhaps a lunatic asylum somewhere in India who believes that the state of Pakistan should be abolished. And if they did want that, you wouldn't believe them if they said, I do want to abolish this state founded in 1947, but I have nothing against Pakistani people. I just want them exclusively to lose the right to have a state which was created and founded many decades ago. So this is the nub of it. The young Americans and others who don't realize what they're calling for, plus the ones who do.
So
absolutely. He's so eloquent in explaining these issues. And I think he touches on really the most important point, which is that every criticism leveled at Israel, from the more, moderate criticisms of like the checkpoints, which they say humiliate Palestinians, to claiming that Israel fighting this war in Gaza is genocide. What they're saying is that everything that Israel's doing, which is a basic step in order to protect her people, to survive, to ensure security, in the most damage limitation way in terms of how the other side gets hurt, in terms of trying to target Hamas, allow for Palestinians to work in Israel, all these things. They say, this is wrong, you can't do that. You can't have that checkpoint in order to check whether someone that's coming into Israel who lives among a society that hates Israel and wants Israel destroyed, to check whether they have weapons on them. They're saying that they don't like the blockade of Gaza, which only existed after Israel gave away Gaza and they started firing rockets in. And Israel said, we have to be able to monitor what's coming into Gaza because it's killing our people when they're sending over rockets. Nope, you can't do that. Nope, you can't fight a war where you have, after the worst massacre of the Jewish people that occurred since the Holocaust happened, and then Israel fights a war where they have more surgical precision in targeting Hamas than any other army has achieved in the history of modern urban warfare, and you still say, nope, that's a genocide as well. It's ethnic cleansing. So everything that Israel does, which is a basic, any other country would do as a basic step to protect themselves. In fact, I'm telling you, they do a lot more than that. And by the way, I think Israel should do a lot more than that. But those basic steps, and you say that's illegitimate, you're basically saying it's the original sin of existing. And while Douglas may describe this as a 70-year-old problem, actually it's a 3,000-year-old problem. Because the Jew has always not had a right to exist. They've always been pushed around from place to place, from country to country, area to area, told you're not welcome. And so actually, you want to go deeper, it's even deeper than just about Israel. It's about the Jewish people and their right to exist, which has been questioned throughout all of history. This is not about fighting over a piece of land. This is about actually whether Jews have a right to live on the land of the earth at all. That's what it's about. And getting to the root of anti-Semitism is important. The hostility sometimes is so poisonous that it's really very difficult to heal. But a lot of the hostility to the Jewish people is really just people feeling a sense that they want to treat the Jewish people differently. And we complain about that as Jews. We say, look at these double standards, which are gross and grotesque. But different, being treated different, if people know deep down there's something different about the Jews and we have to treat them differently, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Size difference can be a very good thing. I think human beings do know deep down there is something different about the Jewish people. And if we keep trying to escape that difference, we're going to be chasing our tail, running around in circles. We tried that before. We tried that in 20th century Europe, and it didn't work out so well because we can't escape our identity because it's too essential to the world's purpose. So we complain that they treat us different, and they have a sense that they should treat us different. But maybe it could be for the positive being different. Maybe if we tell them the positive difference that we have, because the Jewish people are not like the other nations of the earth. We're not. And the more we try to be like that, the more everyone's going to get frustrated. The Jewish people are God's chosen people. Chosen by him. We didn't do the choosing. It wasn't us. He chose the Jewish people to be his voice to the world. The voice of his Torah, which is his will and desire for the kind of world that he wants to dwell in. The Jewish people are the teachers of God's morality, of God's will in this world. That's what they were charged to do. And you have a classroom where the teacher wants to fit in and be like the student. The students will simply run riot in the classroom. They'll bully the teacher, take advantage. And the teacher can complain all about the double standards, that they're not being treated like the other students. But the truth is that part of the reason is because you're not a student. You're the teacher. And so my view, and I think what Judaism comes to tell us, is that if we embrace our difference and tell the world, and don't hide away from it, but fully tell the world about who we are and what we are, then actually, though there will be some kicking and screaming, actually many people who just sense there is a difference between the Jewish people and the rest of the world will actually come to embrace the Jewish people. I think anti-Semitism thrives on us being a mystery. They wonder, who are you? They sense we're not like the other nations. And so the more we deny it, sometimes the more they get frustrated. How about this for an approach? We fully embrace and articulate our difference to the world. That really, in my view, is the only ultimate solution to all of this. Because this is fundamentally a religious conflict that we're seeing going on with Israel. Despite what you might be told about it being about self-determination and a land dispute, no, what's going on here is you have an Arab Muslim world that believe that they have superseded the Jewish people as God's chosen people and as God's messengers. And part of their narrative for that was that the Jewish people had been scattered all over the world and they could say forsaken by God, wandering the earth. Suddenly they return to their land, restored to their nation state, after 2,000 years of exile. What does that mean? Maybe God is keeping his promise, where he said, I'll exile you, but I'll return you. Well, that's very threatening to an Islamist worldview. That's why they have to get rid of Israel. Must be an evil, must be a test from God. But we're not going anywhere, because the Jewish people represents the very purpose of creation, the very purpose of this world, which is to be vessels to bring heaven down to earth. And earth is naturally going to resist that, because it's in some ways is an unnatural transition, an unnatural relationship. Let heaven be heaven, let earth be earth. But that is our mission. It's a mission which we've had a lot of success in forging, but there's more to do. And shying away from that won't work, because anyway, deep down, the nations know, and by the way, especially the Arab Muslim world know who we are. And they know it. And they're threatened by it. And Therefore, whether we deny it or don't, it is the truth. So how about we don't deny it? How about we say it straight to their faces and we fully embrace our role? I have a feeling that actually, if we did that, the world would celebrate. They would embrace us. We haven't tried it yet. As a nation, as one people together. The world is crying out for moral leadership. The world is full of such confusion. There's such a moral vacuum. They're crying out for meaning, for purpose. We can give it to them. They know there's something special and different about the Jewish people. That's why they're magnified on us. So why don't we just tell them the truth? Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.